Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Webtoon Book Club. Today's episode, Sweet Home. This is an exciting story. This is probably one of my favorites, and definitely one that's going to take a good long while. And it also has a Netflix series that accompanies it. But we'll cover that later. Anyway, to start off, here is, let's not just waste more time. Here's the story. Our story starts with a kid that is isolated up in his room as he plays games on his computer. His parents come in saying that they're going to be leaving on a trip, and he just doesn't want to go. Just refusing to be responsive or really anything. So, they just leave without him. And while they're leaving, they kind of just don't know what to do. As they're just trying to figure out, it's like, why is he acting like this, everything of that matter. But that doesn't last long as they get hit by a car, and they all die in the accident. So now our main character is left all alone, and has just whatever was left to him to survive on. So what he does is he rents out an apartment at a cheap apartment building, and as he really doesn't seem to have much to want to do with his life, or much to really want to do from there on, he makes a plan to watch the finale of his favorite show that is apparently getting a theatrical release, and then to off himself the next day. Yeah. But that plan shortly gets ruined, as in the middle of the night, he hears a noise happening outside. He goes to check, and what he finds is his box of ramen that he ordered the day before, or whatever. Torn open, and all the containers scattered all over the floor. And there's a weird noise coming from his neighbor's apartment building, or apartment room, whatever. So he goes over to check, and all he sees is the cat, which then gets grabbed by this malformed arm and hand that kind of looks like beef jerky. So with that, he runs back to his apartment building, thinking, what the heck did he just see? For his neighbor to then come knocking at his door, asking about her cat and wondering, where did her cat go? But before he can really give an answer, she then starts banging on the door, wanting food, and wanting to come in. He doesn't let her in, and it says just terrified. But then there's an electric guitar that starts playing upstairs. This gives the girl's attention. She runs up to upstairs. And our main character is just sitting there like, is this a nightmare? What is happening? Then we cut to the upstairs neighbor, a girl who was playing guitar, who then gets this neighbor at her door. Or now banging and screaming about food and wanting in. And she's just absolutely flabbergasted by this as well, especially considering that this other girl is bleeding at the nose and her face is becoming contorted. So, I can't quite remember what actually happens with that, but that doesn't really matter, as we really don't see what happens, I don't think. So, the next morning, our main character wakes up, and when he looks outside thinking it was all just a dream, he sees that there's smoke billowing out of buildings, and there's fires happening. And when he looks on the ground, there are just creatures and monsters roaming all over the ground. And yeah, what happened last night was not a dream. It was real. And from here, we will be getting introduced to multiple different groups of survivors. One is the guitar girl, who is teamed up with a guy who is wielding a samurai and loves and is a diehard Christian. And then we have a team of a redheaded girl with an old man with a crossbow and a bigger guy who everybody keeps referring to him as like a mafia guy. But we later find he's just an ex-cop who was kicked out of the force for excessive violence or excessive force. So, our main character looks out the window, and there is a guy climbing out the sides. His kids are looking down and hoping that he'll be safe, as he says that he's just going to get some stuff to help them deal being locked into their apartments. But from the ground, an eyeball monster then stretches its head and neck up to him and knocks him off, causing him to plummet to the ground. And with that, the eyeball monster starts to go after the kids, but the main character manages to get the attention of the monster. So the monster then draws its attention towards him, and he tries to fight it off with a knife, but that doesn't work as the eyeball monster wraps its neck around him and like a snake, catching him and then starts to try and squeeze him. But then its neck gets severed. So the kid looks outside and sees an older gentleman who's made shift a gun out of a crutch. And with a sign holds a sign out the window saying that the monsters don't die easily, and when he looks down, the now beheaded monster just gets back up and wanders. So yeah, these things don't die easy. And then he writes on his sign that if he wants to help the kids, come to his apartment. But first, our main character needs to use the bathroom. So as he goes in to use the bathroom, a monster manages to break down his door into his apartment. And what we see is this monster has no top of his head. He has no eyes. So he's just kind of wandering about aimlessly. But he knows he's heard noises here. And our main character, our main character still needs to pee. So his plan to try and pee without the monster hearing him is just pee on the rim of the toilet. Which, of course, makes a lot of noise and grabs the monster's attention, who then shoots his arm into the bathroom, which then has, spikes shoot out of it. And, and at this point, almost everybody in the comments of this episode had a much better idea. Everybody's suggesting, go in the sink. How about the tub? What about this? And I just simply said, why not just sit down? So you know what's going to cause the least amount of noise? The least amount of distance to the toilet water. Whatever. We need to make suspense, I guess. So, with that, the monster manages to just wander back out, thinking it got whatever was making the noise, because it's not making noise anymore. So the main character takes a broom, breaks it in half, and tapes the knife to the broomstick. And then manages to get over to the guy's apartment, and we find that this guy is in a wheelchair, but he's very inventive. And he takes the main character's makeshift spear and hooks it up to some car batteries that are stuffed inside a backpack, turning it into an electrical weapon. It's not going to kill the monsters, but it will certainly stun them enough to allow him to escape. Hopefully. So he gets out of the apartment again, and as he tries to make his way to the staircase, he then has to hide into a room because that half-headed monster wanders back into his direction again. And he's hiding, and the monster does manage to find him, which he then stabs him with the spear and electrocutes him, and does manage to get away quickly. And he manages to get upstairs and get to the kids, where he's able to convince the kids to come with him. But when they get out, they notice that there is another monster roaming about, so he tells them to get to the staircase, but stay very, very quiet. So... Wait. Oh no, I missed a bit. No. They get back onto the hallway, and they come across a woman who is wandering around as well. Whoa. So... the kids and the women are all going to get back down to the other guy's apartment, but again, they come across a monster who is like this big, muscly guy. Like, he's just a big, like, Hulk-sized monster, but he doesn't really have a head. His face is basically, like, melted into his shoulder. Like, his shoulder line basically encompassed his head. And his face is like a little smiley face. And he keeps saying protein and swole. Because memes. But the monster notices them, but the woman gets in the way of the monster, allowing the kids to escape, and this woman as well is turning into a monster. And I forgot to mention, so is the main character. As his nose starts to bleed, and what he found out when he was back in his apartment before is that apparently people are turning into monsters based upon their desires. Where this information came from, or presumptionally came from, I don't know. I think it's just, here's some information, and we're just gonna roll with that. So, yeah. Either way. So the lady basically jumps onto the muscular monster and basically can't die because she's partially into monsterization, so she's basically just as invincible as it is. And our main character stabs the thing, electrocutes it, and they're both able to get away. But while the kids are in the staircase, they then do come across the half-headed monster who's wandered into the staircase. Now, our other characters were able to get to the staircase as well and notice the half-headed monster. And they're thinking they can easily sneak by, but Big Muscle Guy followed them into the staircase. And, of course, this grabs the attention of the half-headed monster, which attacks to the sound, which, of course, hits the Big Muscle Monster, which then the Muscle Monster grabs the arm of the hearing monster, pulls it towards him, and then slams his head into a wall. And while those two are fighting, it allows our characters to be able to run away and get to the inventor's apartment room, where our main character, where the other three are able to stay, while our main character goes out to see if he can find more survivors or help, and then ends up coming across Guitar Girl and the Christian guy. And he over the series gains a deeper affection for Guitar Girl because it starts out with her just looking a lot like the main character of his favorite show. So, of course, he gets much more friendly with her quicker, and that ends up going from there. So, our main character, so these three are going about and make it back to the inventor guy's apartment. where they all spend the next night there. And what is going on with the other group of 3 people, of the old man, girl, and tough guy? They're just going through each and every floor and killing monsters, and they know that to kill the monsters they need to burn them. Now, what happened the previous night during the monster outbreak, there was a bunch of people downstairs in the lobby of the apartment building. And when they saw what went on was there was monsters standing outside, and they just thought it was just a weird guy. Then it changed shape and shot its tongue into the door and managed to kill somebody. And while it was trying to get in, they managed to keep it pushed out while they were able to hit the emergency lockdown button in the security office and have the security gates close and then block off the door. And the group downstairs is led by a guy that has a similar interest as our main character, but he's definitely a lot more nerdier. Where our main character is kind of like brooding teen, I would say. He's a gamer. He's a nerdy guy who is just like a brooding gamer guy. He's just weird. So, yeah, there's that. So the inventor guy gives the Christian a shield that's also hooked up to car batteries. So they all go out to see if they can get downstairs, or to see if they can find more people, and they end up having to get into a fight with another monster. I forget what this monster looks like or does, but he almost pins down the Christian guy and puts him into a tough situation, but luckily main character has a spear that he shoots him with, stabs him with. I keep kicking cords. Anyway, they eventually come across the group of monster hunters, I'm going to say, where they all lead back downstairs and then but then when they find out that a main character is turning, and when the group of survivors downstairs finds out that our main character is turning into a monster, there's one guy that's very adamant to throw him outside. But some people are a bit against it, some are not so sure. So the nerdy kid, I'm just going to say, comes up with the idea of having a vote. And everybody will vote to rather allow him to stay or force him to leave. And when the votes are cast, he ends up being allowed to... The votes casted say that he's allowed to stay by 1 vote. But the guy who is very adamant to kick him outside doesn't accept this and just says to throw him out anyway. And he gets so worked up over this that his nose starts to bleed. So our main character just simply looks at him and goes, well, I guess if I have to go, that means you have to go too. So, of course, now the situation has changed, and the resolution is put the infected people in a separate room. In a separate locked room. But, of course, this just means the one guy, the nerd kid, has a plan to use for the main character to basically send him into dangerous situations. Because he's, I guess, got a plan. I don't know. Guitar Girl isn't really happy about this. But what's going to happen is happening. But the main plan is to try and get power back onto the building by turning on a generator. So, of course, our main character is sent to go get that generator turned back on, but of course runs into problem with monsters, of course. But eventually, after dealing with some of the monsters and such, they are able to get the power back on. And the main reason they need the power back on is because they need to bring the guy in the wheelchair and the kids back down to the main floor. But of course they can't bring the inventor down because he's in a wheelchair. So they need the elevator. So of course they need the power on. But when they get the power back on and the elevator's working again, Guitar Girl swears that she saw the max capacity light come on just for a moment. So then when the elevator gets back down to the main floor and opens up, what comes out is the security guard for the apartment complex. And he seems fine at first, until he's not, because he's actually a monster who just seems to be mostly normal, except his face is all messed up and weird. So, of course, he then starts to attack everybody with a gas-powered, I guess, hedge trimmer or weed whacker or something. Basically, it's kind of like a weed whacker, but it has a metal blade, so I guess it could also be used for cutting bushes? I don't know. If anybody has the actual term of what that thing is called, let me know. Not like I'm going to actually need to use that again, but that would be nice to know. Especially for everybody else that would need to know that. So, our gang now has to fight that. And they're able to manage the fight pretty well at first, but of course they have to avoid the blade. So when the Guitar Girl gets knocked down, and our main character kind of gets tossed to the side a bit, the Christian guy steps in and manages to cut the line on the gas tanks. And gas is spilling everywhere, but at the sacrifice of himself, they are able to light the gas on fire and burn the guy up. But this didn't seem like it was enough damage. But then somehow a monster manages to attack the security guard from outside, and that kills him as he basically gets sucked up into the wall. Apparently there's a monster that's on the side of the survivors, or it just doesn't care. I don't know. Maybe it just thought, hey, here's a thing I can eat. I don't know. That thing is never explained, and it only appears one other time to do the same thing. And it's never explained what that is or why. Either way. So they get the elevator to manage the work. And the reason why it was going at max capacity is because apparently every time the security guard killed somebody, they would absorb them into himself. So it was max capacity because he basically absorbed enough people to make his own personal weight reach the max capacity level. But either way, they're able to get the wheelchair guy back down to the main floor. And their new plan is, because they're running out of food and they also need medical supplies, is that they're going to stop by the nearby grocery store and at the hospital. But they need an armored vehicle to be able to do that because there's all the monsters outside. So with the power working, they look at the security cameras to see if the garage is safe, and it isn't. There's only 3 monsters down there, so of course they advise a plan to take care of those monsters. Once they have their plan ready, they go down in the middle of the night where the monsters seem to be resting. Some noise, something sounded like it was gonna fall off. Oh well. Doesn't go exactly the plan, but they are able to manage to make it work regardless. The garage is safe, so Inventor Guy is able to get to work. There are periods within this comic where the characters are mainly just kind of sitting around downstairs, sitting around on the bottom floor, and just conversating about and basically trying to make the best out of the situation. And it doesn't slow down the pacing, and it doesn't ruin the story at all. If anything, it is a good, nice calm in between these series of intense action and chaos. But after one of those moments, after that after a short period of that, they get the inventor guys manage to suit up a large SUV with armor and a flamethrower. And for the most part, all the characters we've come to know joins in. And including a woman that we kind of know in the story, but I haven't really mentioned because it's not entirely important. She wants to join because she kind of regrets being a bit useless or such throughout. But she wants to kind of make up for her mistakes. Oh, yeah, the guy that wanted to throw out the main character turned into a monster at one point, and his wife apparently was able to keep him calm enough to finish the job. Yeah. It's kind of just it's a moment. And I forget where it was put. So I'm just going to put it here, and then we're going to get right back to where we were. So, yeah. But again, it's like this lady's story, what happened isn't the most important thing. It's kind of there to, like, allow some more naturalness to occur or something. This story is a bit long, and this is just stuff that's like, it's kind of there to pad it out, but it also doesn't detract from the story as a whole. It's stuff where it's like, it's a give and take, where it's like, it's not like it doesn't need to be there, but at the same time, you could take it out and miss nothing. But again, it's like, it's not like you really would miss. But again, it's not like it slows down the story. This is a very well-paced story, and I wouldn't say anything in this slows down the story and be like, well, that was pointless. Nothing in this, I would say, is pointless, or in the case, unneeded. So, the gang gets out of the garage with their armored truck, and then immediately get hit by the muscle guy, who earlier came across our Monster Hunter gang, and they managed to lure him to basically break himself through a wall and fall to the ground below. But now they have to fight him again. And that starts to become tough, and he actually manages to kill the old guy with the crossbow, as he was saving the other girl, the redheaded girl, and pushed her out of the way. So it's a big moment there. And the woman who joined them ran away almost immediately. And then, while it seems like the muscle guy is about to smash them to pieces, in comes a bus smashing him against the wall. And I guess this killed him, even though it's shown that something like that probably shouldn't. Especially considering this guy is like a big mass of muscle and whatnot. Either way, they don't have to deal with him anymore. And out comes from the bus is the lady who ran away, along with like 4 other guys who apparently was driving the bus before. And the leader of these 4 guys recognizes the ex-cop, because that ex-cop was the one who arrested him and threw him in jail. So, they have some tension between them. And the criminals basically force everybody inside, as the main leader has a gun. A proper gun. And he basically tells everyone that they're going to listen to him. Because if they want food, they have to listen to him. If they want any food, they have tons of food in the bus. So the nerd kid and the tough guy get locked in the room, and to also show that they aren't kidding around, there was another woman who was turning into a monster that they just shoot dead. Not even any hesitation on it. So, what the leader does is he takes the main character and one of their guys, who is also a half monster, who is basically a half monster, because apparently he has a split personality, one that's normal and one that's insane, and it's the insane one that's turned into a monster. So he has a more control over it, I guess, but he doesn't really have a control of which side is appearing at what time. So both of them go up to... Oh my god, The reason why they were sent up is because far earlier in this story, the lady that they found earlier when he was saving the kids did turn into a monster while in the bathroom. While she went to the bathroom. And the monster she turned into was a giant fetus, basically taking up the bathroom as if it was a womb. So when our main character and the criminal get up to that room, what they find is the monster is not a monster anymore. Instead, what's left is like this egg cocoon thing. And of course, the criminal wants to burn it. But the main character doesn't want it to get burned, as he's kind of aware of what happens in the minds of people as they are monsters. As throughout the story, we occasionally go into him fighting this like anti-version of himself that is trying to convince him to just give into his desire and live, I guess, a happy life in his own mind, because that's all they're doing. Is these people will turn into monsters, but they live their desired fantasies out. And their desires also show the monster that they turn into. Very weird logic, but it just is what it is. But Guitar Girl manages to catch up to them and knocks out the criminal, and our main character and her are able to get away. Our Nerd Kid and Tough Guy work out a plan and manage to escape the room, and one of the other criminals walked up, cornered one of the survivors on one of the upper floors, and then came across a completely nude lady who the other girl who was being chased just attacks and kills. I have everything at this point completely messed up because I honestly because things are going so quickly and so back and forth, it's hard to keep up. But anyway, the other criminal, I think, just ends up getting killed in some way. I think just by a regular monster. The big main criminal ends up getting in a fight with the tough guy, and I think he ends up getting thrown out a window and lands in a tree. And of course, I think the redhead girl managed to sneak onto the bus and found, they don't have any food. They just want to control because that's just what they want to do. And everything just starts to fall apart for the criminals really quickly. And the main boss criminal sees one of these cocoon things that breaks open, and out comes what seems to be a normal person, but it's one of the neuter people. Our main character goes back down to the garage to try and get the wheelchair guy, but he's already turning into a monster and is pretty too far gone. He's pretty too far in and kind of just accepts his fate at this point. And somehow, I guess within a fight with one of the criminals, the entire garage ends up catching on fire. And then our main character kind of has to take care of... No. I think the wheelchair... Somehow the whole garage ends up on fire. And the wheelchair guy ends up getting burned after kind of showing what type of monster he's turning into, which at this point doesn't really get too creative. All the people who recently turned into monsters just kind of turn into like jerky, kind of like beef jerky versions of themselves. It's not all that impressive at that point. But regardless. But our main character comes across another nude person. And he's basically saying it's like, this is the new age of humanity, and this is what humanity is going to be. and blah blah blah. And what we end up finding is the negative version that he's been combating in his head is his soul, and the souls of humans have rebelled against them and is turning them into monsters because they're just tired of dealing with them or whatever. And yeah. Either way, our main character runs back up to the top, manages to get back on the ground floor, and they all have a plan because everything is basically going wrong here. And the new plan is to escape into the hills behind the apartment building, as it is in close access to everything they need. Food. Yeah, the hospital is against that hillside. The grocery store is near that hillside. They basically have access to everything they need, and the monsters don't seem to be in that area. So they all make their way up to the roof, where they will basically zip line across over the wall, all of the apartment building's property, and then hide out into the woods. But on their way up, they have, our main character hides away in a room as he's having another episode. And Guitar Girl, every time he has an episode, Guitar Girl manages to snap him out of it each time. So while he's having an episode, she manages to snap him out of it again, but she ends up getting snatched by a flying monster, while our main character is able to save her from the flying monster back up on the upper floor. The flying monster is now causing problems for everybody else. So the half-monster criminal who's now helping our main gang is trying to fight this thing off, and manages to do so well enough. So our gang is able to get the makeshift rope, which is, I think, just a bunch of shirts and cloth and whatever, all tied together. Because that'll be very strong and stable. And it's what it is. And a few people manage to get across, but then up climbs from the building the main boss, criminal, who's now turned into a gigantic monster, who then immediately kills the half-monster criminal. And our main character, wanting to protect everybody, gives in to his monsterization and ends up turning into what is essentially a knight in armor, which is then just immediately revealed as him turning into one of the characters from his favorite show, I guess. Because why not? So, the now monster version of the main character is fighting off the big boss and manages to successfully beat him. But now he turns towards the rest of the group. And the nerd kid, who's kind of been dealing with nosebleeds and everything for a while now, tells everybody to get off the roof and he'll deal with them. And once everybody's off the roof, he gives into his monsterization as well and turns into a giant pile of flesh pancake thing that literally covers the entirety of the roof. And then quickly shrinks and dissipates, and what's left behind is 2 cocoon eggs. Then we get a time skip of a few months where our main gang is safe inside a heavily guarded safe zone. A fort. Safe fort. A fort. A well-guarded fort. And back on the top of the apartment building, one of the cocoon eggs hatches, and out comes the main character in his new version. And then he just wanders down through the apartment building and outside, and eventually manages to find the fort. And when one of the characters recognizes him. They gather up everybody else, and they all run outside to greet him. Now these, like, new human-type beings before have shown to be emotionless and unfazing and just, like, nothing. And just kind of blank. But our main character in this form, actually smiles and has emotion and is really happy to see everybody. And that is where the comic ends. But, as I said at the start, there is a Netflix series that went on for 3 seasons. Now, the first season of the show is the story that I just told. And I will say it is very faithful to the original story. It covers basically everything as it showed. The few things with the characters are changed and there are scenes that are added to kind of give more background and time with some of the other characters, which actually is paced very well and it's actually presented pretty naturally. Some of the changes that happen that deviate from the main story don't really become more frequent as the season rolls on. As the end of season 1 is not how the story ends, not even remotely close. They don't zipline on the top of the building across into the woods. What happens is they all get gathered up into the back of a military truck to be hauled off to a safe zone, which then we find in season 2 has not been established yet. So, yay. But what it is most of the changes that end up happening, for the most part, it's to set up for what will be season 2, and allowing for the changes that will happen with that. Some of the changes that don't do that, some of them I would say it doesn't detract from the story at all. Like, instead of the big guy being hit by a bus, instead it's a fire truck. And it's being driven by a character that I think was just added in for the Netflix adaptation, who is like a firefighter but also like military special forces and undercover agent of what. It's her character's just all over the place, I think. But the changes are not too major. They're pretty small. Like, the criminals still attack the apartment building, but instead of a bus, they're in, like, an armored SWAT vehicle. And these changes, to some end, it's questionable, but to another end, it's like, okay, this is fine. I wouldn't complain about this too much. It's just kind of, like, perplexing to why make some of these changes. But at the same time, I guess, like, yeah, make it yourself a little bit different. So, out of that, like, the first season is extremely faithful. It does really well, and it's presented in a really entertaining way. Season 2, on the other hand, starts out fine. It starts out on a similar tone that the first season ended on, and it worked with that for a few episodes. And then it gets really boring and dull. And it does not seem like it wants to get out of that. As what the show ends up becoming is basically a zombie apocalypse show, but without any zombies. And I don't mean that by the fact that it's like, oh, zombies are replaced with monsters. No, I just outright mean there's no threat. Like, for half the season, they're just you're just following this community of survivors, and they're all just dealing with what is a post-apocalyptic world where they have to live off of the ruins of what was once a prosperous world. And there's like no threat, there's no monsters, and at one point where they do have to deal with so-called monsters, I think they actually are just zombies. I think they literally just made zombies. So season 2 basically just doesn't fit with what the original story was. It fits more as just a zombie survival horror. And it's not even that good because it's very dull, generic, and very boring. In season 2, it becomes a action it becomes like an Asian action thriller. So basically, it's like martial art. It's like cinematic martial arts. So it's a lot of flying, kicking. Yeah, it's a lot of kicking, punching, flying, and just waving about. It's like, okay. Like, it basically becomes like a superhero. Yeah, it's like an Asian superhero thing. It's like, why? It's like, if you really want an opinion on the show here, it's like, I would not... If you want to see the comic adapted well, and you want to see what you've read come to life, then watch season 1. And then you can just not watch season 2 and 3. Because the story, it goes somewhere, but it takes forever to go there. It becomes boring. It kind of sidelines a lot of the characters we've come to know, and it just doesn't stick with the same theming. It's like the main comic is like an action thriller drama, and season 2 of the show, and season 1 fits that very well. It emulates it pretty perfectly. Season 2 becomes like a zombie horror, and then season 3 becomes a martial arts superhero thing. It's like, what's the point? Why? This is one of those things where it's like, I want to know. I don't know if the original creators were really involved when it came to. Were really involved with the show. I'd imagine they had something involving with it. But in the case, I want to know if these were their decisions for season 2 and 3, why? But if this is the result of like studio interference and this was what the studio wanted, then I want to know still why. This is just kind of a messed up thing and it doesn't make sense. But overall, as far as the comic goes, it's a really good story, and I cannot recommend it enough. It is a great read. It might take you a bit to get through it due to Daily Pass, but I do highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. The show, on the other hand, watch season 1 on it. If you want to torture yourself, then watch the other 2 seasons. If you don't, then just watch season 1, and then you can just stop there. But that'll do it for this episode. Like always, list of stories is down in the description below. Pick which one you would like me to talk about next and vote in the comments. And I will see you guys in the next one. See ya.